Well, with deeper insights on the scope of the impacts from a United Auto Workers strike, we have Theile, Vice President of Public Policy for Anderson Economic Group. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Now, I know that the AEG, they've put the estimates that this 10-day strike could potentially have a $5 billion economic impact. How are you categorizing those losses?
Sure. Thanks for having me. So when we publish an estimate of $5.6 billion in potential economic losses, that's for a 10-day strike in the hypothetical scenario of all three, strike against all three, UAW, striking GM, Ford, and Stellantis for 10 days. That's where we get that $5.6 billion number. The categories that go into that are the lost wages. So all of these auto workers represented by the UAW not being paid before strike pay kicks in. The next category is company losses, less those wages that they, of course, won't be paying. We also look at consumer and dealer losses, as well as a very conservative and reasonable estimate for the automotive industry in the current economy.
And so with that in mind, then, when you also factor in things like supply chains, if the strike does go ahead and it does last for 10 days, is there a way to really put a number on it, considering just how interconnected we are now with our global supply chains?
Certainly. While our base analysis here with the 5.6 billion, that is focused on the US. Certainly a global impact would look different. But when we look at suppliers, especially with this tactic announced of potentially striking specific locations, how it affects suppliers will depend on how diversified they may or may not be among these big three OEMs. So, for example, in 2019, we saw suppliers that were 90% or more focused on supplying to GM have to shut down and completely lay off all of their workers for a number of days. If you're a supplier that's more diversified among several OEMs, maybe you're not as impacted as quickly or as strongly, but those supplier impacts are definitely quantifiable, and we will be updating our analysis if and when a strike actually starts.
And Tyler, as you mentioned that comparison with the 2019 UAW strike, how different is this, and what's at stake in terms of what's changed in the industry since that last strike?
Yeah, we're in a much different position than we were in 2019 when a 42-day strike against GM was sustained. The biggest reasons for this difference are, one, the post-pandemic economy. Several industries have been working toward their pre-pandemic numbers but aren't there yet. Several other key economic indicators are not there yet and are not as stable as they were in 2019. The other kind of top two reason, I'll call it, is inventory, as you mentioned earlier. So right now, vehicle inventories are hovering around 55 or so days, fluctuating considerably depending on which data provider you look at, and this also varies widely between make and model of vehicle. However, we're only at about 20% inventory as compared to what we were in 2019. So consumer and dealer losses with a strike in the current climate will be felt stronger and more quickly if a strike goes on more than a few days.
And Tyler, there has been some concern that this could essentially push the US or fast track the US into an economic recession. Are you seeing that in your estimations?
Well, in 2019, if you look at the seasonally adjusted data, the strike did push Michigan in the United States into a single state, single quarter recession. So it would take a lot for this to hit, for example, multiple states or the US data and important economic indicators like GDP as a whole. But it's not out of the question if a quite lengthy strike is sustained.
We'll be keeping an eye on that midnight deadline tonight. Appreciate you joining us this morning. Tyler Theile, thank you so much.